Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits using technology. And joining me today is Sarah Merion. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alexander. So happy to be here with you.
So before we get started, I'm going to call you out right away just to set the tone of this podcast in that you promised me that if you were a guest on my podcast, that you would launch your own after this. So I want to make sure that you tell the world today that you're going to honor your agreement to yourself and that
I
after we
am.
finish recording this, you will, within a reasonable amount of time, start your own podcast.
I love that you are really, really holding me to it. But yes, that it is happening. It's in the works. I'm doing all of the planning right now. One of the most fun things is trying to come up with a podcast name. It's hard to compete with yours, but hopefully we'll come up with something equally as cool.
I have no doubt you'll find something awesome. And if you ever do need help, assistance, tips, I know I gave a couple in the past, but if there's anything I can help you get you to where you need to be, happy to do it.
Thank you.
Okay, so now for today, we talked a bit about the kind of work that you did. And before we get to that, actually, I'm curious to know your superhero origin story. How is it that you got started to work with nonprofits?
So I have probably, in my opinion, a little bit more of a backdoor into working with nonprofits. So my background has always been more in the for-profit sector, working with organizations in a technology, strategy, data capacity. And after I had my first child and I was on maternity leave, I was really kind of rethinking how I wanted to show up in the world. And I'd always been pulled to and inspired by what folks were doing in the social impact space and always a little envious of, oh, I wish I was doing something I felt more meaningful around. And, how can I go and maybe work at a nonprofit or work in that space? And then one day it just dawned on me, why don't I just do what I've been doing, but do it for nonprofits? Because as I started to really delve into it and talk to folks more and learn more and read more, what I was seeing is that I just didn't feel like nonprofits were being served in this data technology capacity in the way that companies in the private sector were being served. And I just really felt like that was very unfair, that nonprofits have so much data and capacity to, in a way, compete, and the ability to figure out how to grow their impact and understand what's going on within their organization, within their data. And I wanted to go and help them and serve them in that capacity. So I basically just kind of teleported myself over to working with new folks, and it was the best decision I've ever made. And I have been extremely happy about it.
It's amazing how much experience and knowledge you can bring that coming from the for-profit world to the nonprofit world. Like there's a lot of overlap between the two industries, and yet, maybe not yet, but I find that once you get into this industry, it's very hard to leave. It's very, very sticky. So I hope you stick around for a while because I'm sure
Thank you.
there's a lot of
I'm
benefit.
stuck.
Good.
I'm
Good,
stuck.
good.
Yeah. There's just so many good folks, working in nonprofit. And I truly feel like it's an honor to do what I do for nonprofits, because I am not one of those people on the front lines of, social impact organizations serving folks. Those are the real superheroes out there, that, the ones that are doing the real work in the world. My work is, I want to be behind those folks, supporting them in what they do to help them do it even better and even more.
Well, that's a type of superhero for me. So amplifying their impact is phenomenal. Is that why then you started your own company, Impact Aligned, is to basically make that shift from the for-profit to the nonprofit industry, or was there other motivations behind there as well?
I mean, that was essentially it. It was, I wasn't. I have a unique skill set that I wasn't going to be able to probably go get just a job within an organization that I would probably be satisfied with, because I like to do a lot of different things. So I said, let me just create my own job. So I created this company so that I could, work with clients in the way that I enjoy doing.
And maybe that title of president was kind of alluring as well, too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice. I think the real boss, the real boss in the company is the clients. But yeah, it's certainly a perk to work for yourself, and there are certainly other things that are not a perk as well. I would say that entrepreneurship is definitely something that I am more suited towards. And I really am very inspired by the creativity that comes along with owning your own business.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's about the output, not the title. I just thought it was cute.
No.
I'm curious then. So, what is, because you offer a number of services with your organization. So, what would be your most popular service, the one that you find is being most requested?
Yeah. So I would say, sorry, I'll caveat popular by saying that my company is only about a year old at this point. So, but I will say that a lot of the clients that I talk to, whether they're current clients or prospective clients that I talk to a lot of people. Number one thing is people are trying to figure out how to understand how to use their data because it is in 1,000 different places and 1,000 different softwares and so many different spreadsheets. And so the biggest challenge that everyone is having is that they don't have anyone to strategically guide them and do the technical analysis that they need done to answer whatever questions that they need answered in order to raise more money, answer board questions, land that really big, sophisticated funder, apply to grants that are requiring more data-driven or data-informed evidence of their program's impact. So they need to consolidate all these things and analyze them. And so it's the strategy of how do you actually go about doing that? How do you ask the right questions? And then how do you have the right skills in order to even deliver the analysis or any type of visualizations they need? That's the number one thing. I would bucket that under essentially program evaluation usually. And then the second, I guess, most popular thing that I also do is dashboards. So this is for an organization that wants to be able to visualize what they're doing. They have data coming in from one or multiple different data sources, and they want to be able to make sure that they can understand it internally and they can also share it externally if they need to, and that they can use the information, the analysis, the visualizations that they're seeing from the data that's coming in their dashboard to help them in whatever meetings that are coming up, whatever questions that they need to answer, maybe to an input into an impact report or anything like that.
I forget the exact number, but I read somewhere something to the effect that there are so many organizations that collect data, and yet only a small fraction of them actually use the data in any meaningful way.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, why do you think that is? And does your strategy service help improve things?
Yeah. So I think I've read and understand that same thing. My opinion as someone, as one person, but someone who's been obviously in the data space and for my whole career and more kind of newly in the nonprofit data space. But my opinion of why people are not leveraging their data from what I've seen in nonprofits is that organizations generally, from what I see and talking to folks, don't have the in-house expertise in order to do the type of technical analysis or even the strategic things that you need to do and the questions that you need to ask before you do the technical analysis. They don't have those types of folks on their staff. And the other challenge is when they need something done or to understand it, it's very challenging to go out and find the right person or the right consultant to bring in to hire to do that. So, I've talked to so many folks who say to me, wow, I didn't know that like this existed or people like you existed, like a data translator. Wow, we really need that. And it's great, but I don't think it's something that's very widely out there right now. So I think that the reason that folks are challenged to figure out how to leverage their data, unpack what it means, figure out how to measure things, anything like that, is because they're not being served by folks like me who realize that nonprofits are an incredible type of market to serve, and nonprofits themselves are very generally small resourced organizations, so it's very challenging. One of the things that I'm trying to do to address the fact that not all organizations can really frankly afford my services is I'm piloting a way to figure out how to scalably ingest data from different organizations and a smaller organization, and then be almost like an outsourced analyst or an outsourced advisor to them. And so they don't need to have somebody on staff. They don't need to have a full-time employee. They don't need to even hire a consultant to come in and answer their questions. But then the day after the consultant leaves in their analysis, they get a question from a funder or a donor or a grant, and they need to figure out how to answer it. So this is something that the questions will never end. And, we need to not stop asking questions either. But we need to understand how to continually serve and demonstrate the impact.
You mentioned that nonprofits are missing the ability to do a tech analysis. The impression I got then from listening to you was that they know they have a problem, they just can't solve the problem on their own. Would you say that's true? Or is it sometimes an education part? There's a moment of education where you have to say, listen, you got all this data, but you're not doing something with it. Or do you normally find that when they come to you, they know they have a problem, they just can't solve the problem on their own?
Yeah, I would say it's in my experience, again, as one person, it's generally the latter, where they generally know sometimes that they have a problem. They need to figure out how to analyze their data to answer some type of priority questions that they have. They don't have anybody to do that for them, though, and that's an issue. Sometimes, and obviously not. Sometimes it's just more of a problem awareness thing, and this is what I do a lot of writing on LinkedIn and in my newsletter and things like that, and which I'm going to be talking about on my podcast, is more problem awareness around what is the value of digging into your data? Why do you need to do it? Why do you need to care about it? Why is this a priority instead of just I know eventually we need to do that and it's important, but this is actually something that's going to yield if you can understand how to unpack and figure out how to measure what you're doing within your organization, will yield a lot of return on investment, or your return on time in terms of how you can do that.
Well, let's scratch that a little bit further. So what are the benefits of using data to help a nonprofit organization?
So number one, obviously, is the ability to demonstrate whatever impact you're doing within your organization, within your programs, so that you can go out and raise more money. I think increasingly funders, donors, are looking for a bit more, not data driven, but data informed evidence of what is happening within your programs. What is the actual impact that you're making, and how are you doing that? And having a bit more concrete, either qualitative or quantitative information around what you're doing, how you're doing it, and even the ability to then forecast based on what you're doing, how you can actually scale your impact to wider populations, is something that is really, really influential in raising more money. And this is the number one thing for across the board for all my clients, how they are using that data and that information, the analysis or any visualizations that we do together. That's the number one way that they are using it. There's obviously so many ways to figure out how to go and raise more money, but this is one aspect and one element that I think nonprofits can start to add into their tool belt of what they do and their strategy for fundraising.
I was wondering, and I don't mean to put you on the spot too much, but do you have any kind of metrics that indicate, for example, that if a nonprofit invests a certain amount of money toward and I like the word data translator, that based on that, they can probably get or expect to receive some kind of X return on their investment, whether it's 2X, 3X. Do you have any kind of metrics of that kind of nature?
I don't. I've played around with that before. I would, in a beautiful world, love to eventually get there. I do not have any type of data like that right now. So, even coming from a data person, yes, I don't have any proof that of sort of the return on investment for investing in your data. Right now, it's more anecdotally and seeing where the industry is going and what I'm hearing from clients in terms of the questions and the sophistication of their donors and how they're asking things.
So you mentioned it demonstrates your impact, raises more money, gives you more information, and you can do it for forecasting. Those are the four main bullet points that I saw. But I think out of all of them, the raise more money seemed to stand out more than the rest. Would you agree? Would you say that's the biggest impact or the biggest return on your investment? Is that ability to then, either ask for more money or answer the questions to those people who want to give grants and then to get more grants.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, money makes the world go round, and nonprofit organizations are not immune to the fact that obviously they're nonprofits doesn't mean that they don't make profit. They absolutely do. It's just a matter of, I think, the fact that it's just like in business, you need money, and that is the fuel to grow, scale any type of organization, nonprofits included.
Yeah, I mean, without money, they can't do their mission. So of course, that's
Right. And not only that, they can't afford to hire people to support them to do that. And nonprofit nonprofit employees are not employees that need to be undervalued and underpaid just because we're working in the nonprofit sector. These are real people with real families and with real mouths to feed that are doing incredible value. And nonprofits programming can't exist without these types of folks who are actually on the front lines trying to deliver it.
yeah, absolutely. I read on your website, I believe, that when a nonprofit would engage your services, especially on the strategy side, that you have kind of like a roadmap of what it's like to work with you. And there's like 6 main steps. And I was hoping we can go through each of those steps to give people a better idea of, what the process kind of looks like when working with a data translator. Sound good?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool.
So I'll go through them.
Did you want me to talk? It's up to you. I can just, read the headline and then you talk about it, or you want to jump in?
That sounds great.
Awesome.
That sounds
So,
great.
number 1 is define your impact. What does that mean?
So defining your impact means, what is it that your organization or your program, what is it trying to achieve? What is your mission? Obviously, you can tell me that. But if you had to tell me in a sentence how you are trying to elicit change and what you are actually doing, it's really important that we actually define what the impact is that you're showing, that you're taking the world from point A to point B. And we start with this high level, sort of more pie in the sky. And then ultimately we work towards these other steps to start to get more granular around it and then align everything as well.
And what is the deliverable or the output from that step? When you finish that step, what can you expect, or what do you need to ask for and receive and either document or plan for at that step?
So that step is, I would say, not more of an output. It's more of an input, and to level set everyone around what the impact is. I would say most of the organizations that I work with, surprisingly, and I'm less surprised now, surprisingly have a hard time answering that question, or even have a hard time having consensus around what the answer is to that question. Even organizations that have been around for a dozen years. I think what's important about understanding this impact question, what we're defining, is if we're going to be measuring something, we need to understand what it is ultimately that we're trying to show. And this is essentially another way of sort of starting to talk about what type of metrics or KPIs that we're starting to skate towards.
Okay, so high level mission statement, maybe KPIs. That sounds definitely like some tangible deliverables.
Yeah.
Okay. Step number 2 then is audit your data. What does that mean?
So this is where we look at where all your data lives in Salesforce, in Bloomerang, in a QuickBooks, in all of your social media analytics, anywhere that you have data, probably on Google Sheets or Excel, in a SharePoint or something like that. We start to get the lay of the land and the landscape of where all your data is, what's in there, and then how it all plays together. So we understand, because we are living in reality, fortunately or unfortunately, we can only work with data that we actually have. And so this gives us the current state of what we have available to work with when we are trying to understand then the next step of how to then go and analyze things. We need to know, I can't analyze anything if I don't have that data. And so that starts to give us the landscape of what we have available, and which will inform later if there are any gaps, what we need, what types of data your organization can eventually start to collect, and how they should be collecting it. And then also for what reason.
Do you normally use and only use the organization's data, or are there other statistics or other external data that you use as well?
I have used we call it third-party data or public information in the past for other types of projects. For my nonprofit clients right now, we just currently use their own data. If there's a use case for using other types of data or information, absolutely, we would pull it in. But right now, we're just using their data.
Is there any concern regarding a lack of data? For example, let's say have you seen a situation where the nonprofit didn't have enough data to do anything with, and then therefore you have to kind of go externally to look at trends and third-party data?
I haven't had a client yet where they had nothing to work with, or too little to work with. I think I definitely have a few clients where the impact that they're trying to show and measure, they don't have the data to support. In those cases, what we do is we try to find a proxy for the impact that they're trying to show or whatever metric they're trying to show. We try to find a proxy with the data that they do have. And then I always talk about more of this phase 2, which is let's reverse engineer the impact that the questions that you are trying to show, and then we reverse engineer what data we do need to go find or collect in order to answer those questions. And that's where I'm talking about the gaps in their data and coming up with a strategy and a process for then how they can actually then go get that data.
And then the output then of that step, audit your data, would look like obviously an assessment of some kind, and a report or analysis, and next steps, or what else would be delivered?
So in the audit your data, this is an interim step. So it's sometimes we're doing it in just a spreadsheet. So it's defining, what it is, what's in there, any type of, nuances. I'll go into their systems if I need to, and kind of we'll look at the actual data fields that are in there, how complete the data is, how clean the data is. And then I also like to do a Miro or a Figma, basically a diagram essentially of where all the software or platforms are and how they are connected or not connected to each other.
Okay. And then we move on to step 3, which is to define leading indicators. What does that look like?
So for a leading indicator, and I'll quickly define how I talk about leading indicators versus a lagging indicator. A lagging indicator is what we would probably just call a goal. It is a past performance type of metric where you don't know if you've really hit it yet until it happens. A leading indicator, though, is much more forward-looking. So this is your ability to understand, are you moving the needle? Because you can understand that if you are, it's forecasting you and telling you you're going in the right direction. And so leading indicators and lagging indicators can kind of play together. And I like to focus on the leading indicators because that is what you can control. Those are your outputs, your activities. And so to give you a very simplistic example of this, if let's say a nonprofit is trying to do a capital campaign, and they're dialing all of their list of donors to ask them to donate. So the goal and the lagging indicator might be, let's say, to raise $100,000. The leading indicator, though, is their ability to actually make those phone calls and those phone calls to convert into donations. And so if you have a few people doing this on your team or one person doing this on your team, your ability to make, 50 phone calls a day and maybe 75% of them convert into a donation of an average of $100, you can start to see that is a leading indicator of whether you will or will not achieve your goal in a couple months of raising this $100,000. So you can see that those activities and those outputs of what your team is actually doing are much more compelling from my standpoint. And that's what I always tell my clients, let's focus on those than focusing on the goal, because we can very easily and quickly see from a leading indicator, do you have the right amount of people on your staff to actually even meet that goal? because maybe that goal is not an appropriate goal. Maybe it's way too low, maybe it's way too high. Maybe we start to learn things about your outputs that and we can say, oh wow, we make a lot more phone calls than we thought we were able to, each day. Or we don't make as many phone calls a day as we thought we could because they end up being richer, more meaningful discussions that take longer. So maybe we don't make 50 phone calls a day. Maybe we make 25. And that is a very, very important type of informant to how you're going to move forward in moving the needle in your organization as it relates to your impact. So that is what I call defining the leading indicators. And that relates to where that information also is then housed. So are those phone calls, are you logging those phone calls maybe in Salesforce, and then starting to understand and really get nitty gritty, where is that data held, specifically where in the software, and what line item or data point or field within your software is what we're trying to focus on.
I had the impression that this stage could be something that evolves, because you talked about the percentage of calls and success metrics and being able to close donors. I mean, there's one thing, of course, to define your leading indicators at one point in time, but it also sounds like there's sometimes moments where you want to refine those indicators as you're progressing through the actual execution. Is that the case? Or do you normally find it just once and then let things roll and then maybe come back later on to redefine them? Or is it this stage more of a longer term process where you stay on board until you do get some of that feedback and then have to adjust or can adjust if needed?
So with these, I mean, I think leading indicators are sort of a living, breathing thing. So I think organizations should always keep a pulse on them. To me, it's not like something that needs to be set it or forget it, or set it and we can't move it. They can always be changed. And frankly, because leading indicators are a byproduct of actions and output, they're going to really change anyway. Or, if another type of goal or impact we're trying to understand, we have to really then understand what is the needle mover of that goal, and start to really then look at that.
Step number 4, align your strategy. What does that mean to you?
So to me, what this means is connecting the dots between what you need and want to know within what you're trying to measure for your impact, and then connecting the dots to what data do you have available to do that. And so we go from that high level strategy of how are we trying to change the world? How are we trying to create change and impact in the world? And how are we trying to measure it? To, okay, here's the specific line item within this specific software and this specific field, and that's what we're looking for. And so that is, in my opinion, it's kind of that alignment of that is the secret sauce that not everybody does, because some people are very heavy on the strategy. This is what we want to do. We want to do X, Y, and Z. And some people are very in the weeds, data. But the magic comes from when you can connect the two together. And so then that's what we do, is making sure that we can talk about high level mission, strategy, impact, and how we want to measure the impact, but make sure that we're able to answer those questions within the data that we have available.
And then, of course, my favorite question is, what is the output from that stage?
Yes. So the output usually is just going to be, do we have the right type of data to answer these questions? If we don't, then what is the process? What is the strategy to going out and getting that data?
And I imagine executive alignment, board alignment, all comes into play as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. It seems like that one that could linger, one of the longest step. Like it's one that people can get stuck on, organizations can get stuck on, because there has to be that alignment, and changing minds, changing perception, changing strategies could be easy, but I can also imagine it's not so easy.
I mean, I'm not necessarily fundamentally working with organizations to change their strategies. It's more whatever we're working towards within the strategy that they already have. How are we able to support that and understand and unpack what's happening? So I don't really linger on this step with my clients. We just sort of move through it. And maybe it's kind of misnamed, I guess, in terms of aligning the strategy, I guess. It's not necessarily aligning their team or the board around what the strategy is. It's aligning how we're going to measure the impact, their impact, and what we're looking to analyze to the actual underlying data that they have available.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thanks for that clarification. Then step number 5 is visualize the outcomes. What does that mean? Or is it visual or visualize?
It's visualize. So visualizations are just an extension of whatever type of analysis we're doing. Oftentimes, I just love to ask clients what and how they want to see things, because we start with ultimately the design, and because they know from a visualization perspective, and this is a messaging perspective and a communication perspective, what it is they need to see or demonstrate or communicate to some type of stakeholder, whether it's their internal staff, the board, the community, a funder, reporting back to a grant. They know how they need to message what they're looking at. And so then what we do is we do the design, and then we build whatever we need to. Sometimes it's just in Excel, and sometimes it's in a platform like Google Data Studio, which is now Looker. I need to call it Looker. But again, in terms of visualizing the outcomes, also from a dashboarding perspective, I am platform agnostic, I say, in that, in my opinion, generally, unless you're doing some pretty sophisticated, complicated type of analytics or statistics or anything like that, they're all going to do pretty much the same thing for what you need. I generally recommend Looker to clients because it is free and it is very widely used in the industry.
Just forgive me because I don't know Looker that well. Is it a data analysis tool, or what is it exactly?
It's a data analytics tool. It's a sometimes you call it a BI tool, business intelligence tool. So if it's the same type of tool, that would be a Looker, a Tableau, or a Power BI. Those are also household names.
Right. Okay. And then, so it's not just visualizing the outcomes, it's also planning them as well, and even executing them at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to get back on the apps in a moment, because I will just finish number 6 before we continue in that thread. Number 6 is tell your impact story. So is that shouting it from the rooftops and saying we did it, or is it more a matter of communicating where we want to go and how we're going to get there more clearly?
Exactly. Yep, exactly. And this is, again, once we have everything, this is just the way to package it all up then, and to say, look, this is what we set out to do. This is how we've done it. This is how we've measured it. This is, different ways that we've been able to visualize it for maybe different people that need to understand it in different ways. Because obviously a funder may have a different type of motivation than a community member or a board member. And this is just the way to either package it up into a program evaluation report, or a public or internal facing dashboard, or however they want to then publish their findings.
In doing all of these steps, you mentioned that you're app or tech agnostic, which is awesome, but you must have some favorites that you like to use, and or apps and technologies that you find some CRMs are using. No, some nonprofits are using. So I'm curious to know, and let's start with the former. What are the typical tools that you use to help you do what you do?
So the tools that I use to do what I do are, I would say, Excel, Looker. I use a lot of data. I guess you call it maybe a diagramming tool. It's called Miro. There's another one called Figma. I use them both. And those are the tools that I use. There's obviously other more very heavy data analytic tools. The clients that I work with right now don't have the volume or the sophistication of data that requires more than really Excel. But there are other tools out there that once you get in, sometimes working with healthcare data, you need to use much more, some different stuff. In terms of the tools that my clients use, most clients are using some type of Salesforce CRM. I see a lot of Salesforce. Whether or not it's a well-implemented Salesforce is another question. But most people are using Salesforce, and frankly, a lot of Excel and Google Sheets. I would say that is the biggest commonality. Outside of there's a million different things that folks are using.
I've yet to hear someone use Microsoft Access, and I'm a champion, or I'm an advocate of Access. I've been using it for way too long, probably since not probably, but actually since version 1.0. And it's an amazing relational database. And yet I've yet to hear anybody who actually uses it. People tend to favor Excel over Access. Do you have any insight of why that is? Do you think maybe more of a learning gap or a lack of awareness in that Access is many times more powerful than Excel for these kinds of analytics?
So I would say, I don't think that, in my opinion, at least my clients, I think that's Microsoft Access is probably going to be a bit more sophisticated of a tool than an Excel. And, relational databases probably need to have a bit more strategy and forethought as they're being built or implemented, which I would say a lot of my clients don't always have data in that way. They're just starting to collect data in many different ways, in survey form, in all different types of survey tools or things like that. And we need to start to then kind of organize all the chaos that there is. So I think that would be my opinion on why, I think we see a lot more Excel or Google Sheets. It's easier to really be a bit more nimble and organic as organizations are growing that way.
Yeah, and I guess I get that. I'm still championing, though, Access. Maybe I'm the only person in the corner, but maybe one day. I just hope it doesn't disappear because there's always been rumors, at least for the last several years, there's been rumors of it disappearing, and I'm hoping that's not the case because I still continue to use it today. Anyway, that was a little tangent sidebar there. Sorry about that.
You're okay.
I'm then curious to know, so given all this, taking it at a higher level, so we got the tools, we talked about the strategy. What are some common best practices for nonprofits to be able to be in a better position to help you help them? Like, is there, aside from obviously giving you their data and telling you all this information that they can, is there anything that they can do to prepare themselves or put themselves in a better position to really benefit from your services?
I would say two things come to mind. One is, as your organization evolves, make sure that whatever data you're collecting is as in a standardized format as possible. And what I mean by that is, if you're collecting a survey, instead of just letting people write in their state, make sure it's a drop down. So where you can standardize data collection and data ingestion, please do that, because it's going to save you a lot of headache down the road. And that's very simplistic, but it's very, very important. They say the devil is in the details, and that is very true. So the second best practice is around any type of duplicate data. So a lot of times we'll have people come into our databases or our Salesforce or our CRMs, and they'll be there multiple times for multiple reasons. We want to make sure to have our data as clean as possible, and this will take some thought and strategic direction, perhaps, around how you dedupe or deduplicate your data. And we don't want to ever delete data unnecessarily, but where we can, let's make sure that you have everything only once, and so we're not double counting things ultimately. This is really going to get very nitty gritty and depend on the type of data structure you have. And sometimes we have people in multiple places and multiple lines because of different types of things and how your software is set up. But where we can, just try to have a data mindset as you're continuing to evolve what you're collecting and how you're collecting it, and see how you can streamline it as much as possible.
I was once brought on for a Salesforce project where it was connected to an e-commerce platform. And every time someone did a transaction on that platform, it created a new contact record in Salesforce. No
Yeah.
checks and balances, just straight pipe. Like,
Yep.
I guess the implementer was too lazy to even bother looking for duplicates, like no email check, nothing, not even first name, last name. It was every single transaction always created a new contact record. And it was like, oh, wow.
Yeah. So imagine being a nonprofit where you have now a lot of organizations have the ability to just donate monthly. I donate monthly to an organization near where I live that provides diapers and things like that to newborns for families in need, which I started doing when I had a child and realized how expensive diapers are. And the idea of having to choose between feeding your family and diapering your baby. Anyway, long aside, but imagine if every single month I was created in their Salesforce record every month because I'm donating just on a recurring basis. So that's a great example of what you provided.
So those are some of the common best practices, which are great. Are there on the flip side of things, are there certain pitfalls that you see or that you find yourself having to regularly warn nonprofits not to do? And I guess it would be in one way the opposite of what you just said now, but I'm curious to know if there's something specific about things not to do or pitfalls or mistakes that they make.
One thing I caution organizations against is if they're looking to change some type of software or platform, or oftentimes it's like real estate. Everybody's always shopping for real estate. Everybody's even if you own a house, you're always looking on Zillow, or even if you have a very nicely implemented Salesforce, you're always looking for something else. Oh, there's something better out there. What I always say to clients is, especially clients who are growing, is if you are interested in some type of new software or platform, please make sure that whatever you choose has some type of API or an open backend. And what I mean by that is think of software or data kind of like a bucket, and you toss things in there and you collect things and you house things in there. We want to make sure, though, that we're able to get things out easily, and so that we can combine it with other sources of data in a really easy way so that we can start to analyze things and figure out whatever we need to figure out. But if your bucket is just a locked box and you just throw things in there and it's just like a locked box, you can't ever get anything out. And so making sure that there is an open back end and it plays nicely with other things. Maybe there's an API, maybe there are native integrations with other things. Hopefully, it's a rather well-known software. Maybe they have Zapier connections, all that type of stuff. That's huge, and that will save us a lot of time. Generally nowadays, most softwares are like that anyway, but sometimes I see people evaluating and wanting to go softwares that's going to be a really, really big challenge.
That's some great advice. Thank you for sharing that. So, Sarah, you mentioned that your organization has been around for about a year. I'm curious to know, what would you like to see in your short-term future? Do you have a vision of where you'd like to be, or how and who you're helping, let's say within 2 to 3 years' time?
Yeah. So in my short term, there's, I would say, two main things happening. One is we spoke about, I will be launching a podcast, and right now it's slated probably for more the spring, maybe late spring to launch. That's the goal there. So my mission with that in the short term for my business is that I want to be a source of education and advocacy for organizations, nonprofits of all sizes, to learn how to leverage the power of their data. And I really, truly believe in that. And so that's ultimately why I'm starting the podcast, is because I can't necessarily serve every single organization, but I want organizations to be able to have the benefit of understanding and developing that data mindset of how to transform their organization over time into more of a data-informed organization to help them. The second thing in the short-term future for my company, Impact Aligned, is to be able to also provide more trainings to organizations around how I do what I do with organizations one-on-one. So again, I'm recognizing that it's increasingly challenging for organizations to afford these types of services. So in an effort to more, in a way, democratize how to use data, I'm starting to develop more trainings for organizations in small group settings so that we can do it together sort of in real time instead of just working with one client at a time.
I'm going to fully support your podcast. Looking forward to the first episode.
Thank you, Alex.
So, Sarah, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining me today. How can people get in touch with you with follow-up questions?
I would love to chat with you. You can find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/IN/Sarah Merion. And you can also find me at my website, impactaligned.com. And there's probably a number of ways on there that you can feel free to contact me and reach out.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Alex.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.